Good morning, everyone. I am sorry if I cannot attend to our online class for this week, but I hope this discussion video will help you to answer your activity on the week number 3. So to start with, we have here our objectives. For the first objective, we are going to analyze and apply the breaking down of database field name into smaller parts. Second, we're going to identify and explain the kinds of electronic database. Now, we have two kinds of electronic database. For the first kind of electronic database is no other than the flat file database. Once we said flat file database, it is designed to put up all the informations into one table only. So, ibig sabihin, once you gathered information into a certain person or into a certain subject, then you are going to put it into one table, then that is now what we call a flat file database. The next example is the student information system. So we have here our student ID, student name, contact number, college, and the course. Up to the course, from the student ID up to the course is now considered as a personal information. Then the subject code, subject description, and the subject unit is pertaining to a subject or to the student subject. So we can consider this one as a subject information. Kaya lang, pinag-combine na natin siya into one table. So that is now what we call the flat file database kasi magkakahalo-halong information sila sa isang table. So, that is the flat file database. Next kind of electronic database is no other than the relational database. Relational database naman, one or more table are linked together or no, one or more table are linked or related to another tables. So, ibig sabihin, yung isang table ay may relationships to another table. So, example, pinaghiwalay na natin yung ating personal information dun sa example natin kanina sa flat file information, flat file database. So, we get only the student ID, student name, contact number, college, and of course, the course. Nawala na ang ating subject information kasi ihiniwalay na natin siya. So, magkahiwalay na ngayon yung table ng subject information at saka personal information. Now, paano natin malalaman kung itong Ecology 2 at Chemistry 1 ay subject ni Mr. Leo at Physics ay subject naman ni Adrian. And of course, English ay subject naman ni Manilyn. So, paano natin ngayon malalaman kung ano ang mga subject ng mga estudyanteng to kung magkahiwalay yung isang table or kung nahiwalay yung ating subject information. So, the solution to that one is to put a student ID into our subject information table. Once you put a student ID into our subject information table, then magkakaroon na ngayon ng relationship si personal information into the subject information table. Kasi, nandito na yung student ID. So, malalaman na natin na itong Ecology 2 ay pag-aari na itong student na mayroong student ID na 142556. Okay? Together with the other students. So, through the student ID, malalaman na natin kung kaninong subject itong mga ito. And through the student ID, magkakaroon na tayo ngayon ng relationship to another table. Anyway, we're going to talk about that one on our next discussion or on our next topic through this quarter. Okay? Now next, so those are the two kinds of electronic database, the flat file database and of course the relational database. Flat file database, all information are put into one table only, while the relational database information are put on the different table but they are related with each other. Okay, so that is the relational database and flat file database. Now let us proceed on to the database planning and design. So in order for us to create a database, as you can see here, we have here a teacher. A teacher is creating a lesson plan in order for him or her to teach properly. And of course, an engineer is creating an blueprint in order for him or for them to create a wonderful building or a house. And of course, an architect is creating a designs in order for them to create a beautiful house. Okay? Now, kung yun yung mga ginagawa ng mga professionals na yan, then what are we going to do as a database programmer naman? So, we are going to create a plan, we're going to create our blueprint, and of course, we're going to design as a database programmer. So, gagawa tayo ng plan, gagawa tayo ng blueprint at gagawa din po tayo at magde-design din po tayo ng ating database system. Okay? So in order for us to do that, we need to follow this database planning and design. So we have three phases of database planning and design that we need to follow in order for us to create an efficient and effective database system. First is data definition. Second is data refinement. Then third is establishing of relationship, and that is now what we call the database structure. So there are three phases, only had three phases of database planning and design. The data definition, wherein we're going to define information or we're going to gather information. Then data refinement, we're going to refine the gathered information. Then establishing of relationship, we're going to put a relationship to our gathered information. Okay, so that is we need or those phases we need to follow those phases in order for us to create an effective and of course efficient information. So in order for us to do that, let us do first the first step, which is the data definition. So in order for us to do the data definition, we need to determine first the purpose of our database. Okay, of course, we need to define first why are we creating this kind of database and why are we doing our database. So we need to, in order for us to determine the purpose of our database, we need to follow the following guide questions. So first question, what data or information are needed for our database? Second, who will use the database? Third, what will the user enter into the database? And fourth, what kind of information should the database will produce? Okay, so to give you an example, I have created already here an example purpose of our database. So let's say, for example, we're going to create a database system. And the title of our database system is no other than the Student Information System. Then our objective will be store and display students' personal information. As a reminder, you need to specify what kind of information are you going to store. Hindi po pwedeng ilagay nyo lang dyan na store and display student information. Hindi po pwede. So what kind of information are you going to store? What kind of information about the students are you going to store? So you need to specify if it is a personal information or subject information, medical information, and so on and so forth. So store and display personal information. Specify what kind of information are you going to store. Then, second, store and display student subject information. So this is our guide question that we have discussed a while ago. So tignan nga natin kung nagja-jive yung ating objective sa ating guide question. Kung nasunod ba natin yung ating guide question. So for our first question, what data or information are needed for our database? So what data or information? Personal information. Okay? Now, who will use the database? Students. Okay? So what kind of information? Subject information. Who will use the database? Students. Okay? Then what will the user enter into our database? Personal and subject. So this is the reason why you need to specify what kind of information are you going to store. So specify, sa purpose pa lang, you need to specify now what kind of information are you going to store. So, yan po siya. What will the user enter? Then, what kind of output should the database will produce? Kaya meron dito yung word na display because ipapakita niya yung personal information. Ipapakita din niya yung personal information and subject information. But if you want your database to print reports or print information, then you can integrate there into your objective that store and print or pwede ring print students' personal information or print students' subject information. So, what kind of output should the database will produce? So, parang ganun siya. Okay, so that is how are you going to create the purpose of our database. All you have to do is to follow this guide question. Simple lang naman po siya, store and display. So always remember you are creating a database. It means you are going to store your gathered information. So, ang magiging phrase word lang po natin lagi is store. Okay? Kasi mag-i-store muna tayo bago tayo mag-organize. So that is our role as a database programmer. Now, after identifying or after determining the purpose of our database, then we are now ready to proceed to the next step wherein we're going to determine we're going to determine the field names that is needed to our database, that is needed in our database. So sabi natin kanina sa objective ng ating database is that we're going to store personal information of our student, and of course we're going to store and display subject information of the student. So we're going to follow those guide question or follow those purpose still. Based on the purpose, madedetermine natin kung anong klaseng field names ang i-store natin sa ating database. So, di ba alam na natin kung anong purpose ng ating database. So, malalaman na natin ngayon kung anong klaseng information ang i-store natin sa ating database at yun na ang gagawan natin ng field names. So sabi natin into our last discussion, pag sinabi nating field names, this is a description of the records. So ito yung label na nakalagay sa column natin sa ating table. Okay, so to do that, think of a piece of data that pertains to a certain person or a subject. Example natin kanina, we're going to create a student information. So example natin is, example identified field name is student name. Next, student address, and of course, phone numbers. So this information are pertaining to the personal information. Wala tayong na-identify na subject information. So let's say for example, na-identify na din natin ang ating subject information. Example lang para mas mabilis. Now, after identifying the following field names, so na-identify na natin yung mga field names natin, all we have to do next now is to do the field definition principle. Hindi pa dyan nagtatapos. Once you identify the field names, ang gagawin na nating susunod is to perform the field definition principle wherein we're going to break down the field names into smaller parts. Okay? And to do that, yung I have here, yung na-identify natin kanina is student name. The next is this address. And lastly is the phone number. So, student name, pag breakdown natin si student name, magiging last name, first name, and middle initial. Now, so kung mapapansin natin, hinati-hati natin yung student name or yung pangalan natin. So, our name is divided into 3 parts. Sometimes it is divided into 4 parts kasi yung suffixes. Now, so sa ating database, we need to or we are required to break down the field names into smaller parts by dividing also our field names into based on the parts of the information. So, yung name natin ay na-divide siya usually sa three parts. So, yun ay yung last name, first name, and middle initial. So, that will be our student name. Then, yung address naman, na-divide din siya sa madaming parts. So, pwede natin siyang gawing street, barangay, and of course, municipality and province. Pero kung mapapansin yung phone number, hindi natin siya break down, no change po ang nangyari sa phone number. Bakit no change ang nangyari sa phone number? Think of it. Pwede ba nating i-divide or pwede ba nating i-divide ang information na na ilalagay natin sa phone number? Of course not. Okay, isa lang naman po ang ating phone number. Next, unlike on the student name, naka-divide or pwede nating i-divide yung information kasi meron siyang iba't ibang part or may iba't ibang part yung information. So, yun po siya. Pero yung phone number, iisang part lang naman po siya, iisang information lang naman po ang tinutukoy ng ating phone number. So, hindi po natin siya pwedeng i-break down. Okay? So, ito na po yung breaking down of field names. So, this is the student name, the address, and of course, the phone number. Now, question, bakit ba natin kailangang i-break down ang field names? And na-identify na nga natin. So, hindi ba po pwede na yan na lang ang gamitin natin to create our database? Of course, hindi po pwede. Kasi once you create your database with that field names, ganito po ang mangyayari. Once na pumunta na po tayo sa query at search engine, at gagawa kasi kayo ng search engine, once na nakagawa na po tayo ng search engine at magsa-search yung user natin ng information, at ang alam niya lang na information is yung last name. Hindi niya alam yung ibang information like first name and age and others. Ang alam niya lang is last name which is Smith. Now, once clinic niya yung search, then ito ang magpapakita. Ilalabas niya lahat ng mga records na nakalagay sa student name. Then, sasabihin niya, zero record found. Bakit zero record found? Kasi wala siyang mahanap na exact na word na Smith. Kaya mas mabuti kung i-break down natin yung field name natin into smaller parts. Kasi pag itong student name naka-breakdown into last name, first name, and middle initial, then magsa-search na lang tayo sa last name kung ang alam lang natin na information ay yung last name. Once na sinearch natin ang Smith sa last name, then ipapakita niya lahat ng Smith together with its first name, middle initial, and the other records of this person. Okay, so yun po siya. So you need to break down the field name into smaller parts. So sana po na-gets. So as a summary, I have a question here that you need to realize, of course, why is it necessary or why is it important to understand the phases of database planning and design? Okay, then as a summary, I have here some field names that is need to be break down into smaller parts. So we have here the student name. Pag break down natin, magiging first name, last name, and middle name or middle initial. Then of course, provided na din po yung reason why, bakit kailangan natin siyang i-break down into smaller parts. Then we have here also the address, kaya lang kulang yung nakalagay, pero pwede nyong dagdagan if you want to. So, street address, city, ganon, municipality, barangay, ano pa, CTO, and so on and so forth, will allow the user to search for the students living in the same city. Next, phone number, no change kasi isang part lang po na information yung nandyan. Teachers, pwede po nating i-break down si teachers into teacher's name, and of course, hindi naman siya magiging teacher kung wala sang subject na tinuturuan. So, subject taught. Okay? Pero yung student name or teacher's name pala, yung teacher's name, pwede pa ba nating i-break down? Of course, yes. Pwede pa nating i-break down yan into teacher's last name, teacher's first name, teacher's middle initial or middle name. Together with the advisor's name. So, isa lang naman ang advisor nyo. That's why no change. Kaya lang yung advisor word na name, pwede ba nating i-break down into smaller parts? Of course, yes. Advisor's last name, advisor's first name, advisor's middle initial. Okay? So, subject. So, subject name. Pag sinabi nating subject name, ito yung pangalan ng subject ninyo, which is yung English, computer, science, mathematics, Filipino, and so on and so forth. Then, hindi naman magkakaroon ng subject kung wala kayong or kung hindi kayo magkakaroon ng subject grade or yung grades ninyo sa subject. Okay, kaya lang question, pwede pa ba nating i-break down ang subject grade? Of course, yes. Pwede pa nating i-break down ang subject grade into first grading grade, second grading grade, third grading, and of course, fourth grading. Okay? Then, we have also the average. Pwede ba nating i-break down si average? Of course, no. Okay? Kasi si average, isa lang naman ang average, hindi naman po pwedeng hatiin si average kasi isang part lang naman pong information ang meron kay average. Together with the grade level and together with the section, isang section lang naman ang meron sa inyo, wala namang ibang part ang information ng section. Then, birth date. How about birth date? Of course, yes. Pwede nating i-breakdown si birth date. Kasi meron siyang tatlong part, di ba? So, birth month, birth year, and birth day. The next, age. Pwede ba nating i-breakdown? Of course, no. Kasi nga, iisang information lang naman po ang nire-require ng age or isang part of information lang naman po si age. So, yun lang po. So, in your activity number 2, I guess activity number 2 yun. Sa week number 3, we're in breaking down of the information. I guess alam nyo na po kung ano ang gagawin ninyo by watching this discussion video. So, good luck to your activity and good luck to your exams.